Bueno, tenemos a continuación una persona que ha hecho un esfuerzo muy especial por estar con nosotros en un viaje hiperlargo con cambios de vuelos y tramos de carretera, etcétera. Ha sido un verdadero esfuerzo y se lo agradecemos muy especialmente. Se trata de Lubomira Vavrova, no sé si lo he dicho bien, perdóname, Lubomira. Okay. Vale. Bueno, yo os cuento que es especialista en ecología animal. Ha trabajado en un programa muy interesante, un Life en su país, Eslovaquia, sobre vencejos y murciélagos. Actualmente es consultora freelance en temas medioambientales y especializada en adaptaciones entre construcción de viviendas, rehabilitación de viviendas y fauna. Bueno, tiene un largo listado de trabajos, ha estado en el Instituto para la Conservación de la Naturaleza de su país durante 4 años. Ha trabajado, como os he dicho, sobre conservación en ecología de animales. Ha sido manager de proyecto, directora de proyectos en la Unión de Serbia en Belgrado de la conservación, bueno, etcétera, etcétera. Perdóname, no lo voy a leer todo porque la verdad es que es muy extenso el currículum de Lubomira. Así que vamos a intentar escucharla con atención y a seguir sus pasos. Muchas gracias, Lubomira. Adelante.
Okay. Buenos días. And if you don't mind, I switch to English because that is the only 2 words I know in Spanish. So first of all, thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me here. It's really a valuable experience for me, especially after the yesterday discussion, because I realized that all the problems we discussed yesterday, we went through all these problems like 6 years ago. So you are on the right way. And I believe that you will find in my presentation some useful information and hints or suggestions how to deal with the problems that you are having now and you will have in the future for sure, unfortunately. If you don't mind, I will stay like this. So the project I will be referring to, thanks, in my presentation was implemented back in 2012 and 15. It was projects implemented by 3 NGOs, all of them the leading NGOs in birds and bats protection in Slovakia. And it was a project implemented in the entire country. I know that Slovakia is this size and Spain is this size, so it's much easier for us to do something at the country level. But that's the life. Sometimes it has some positives to live in a small country, but not always. I can say very simply that the situation before 2014, when we had already some compensation measures implemented, and after was completely different, as you can see on the picture. Before, a lot of animals were killed by a reconstruction of buildings and thermal insulation. I will talk about it a little bit later. And since we started implementation of the compensation measures, situation improved significantly, and now we have cities full of happy birds and bats, so to speak. Well, at the beginning we had serious problems. The thermal insulation started back in 90s, in the 20th century, and it was not that intensive, so basically nobody was interested in this topic, neither construction companies nor conservationists, because it was not a problem. But when the state decided to provide financial subsidies for these activities, then it started to be a huge problem, because the thermal insulation started to be a massive activity in all cities. And all of a sudden you had all cities with reconstructed buildings in 1 or 2 years. So we were losing hundreds of nesting and roosting sites, and hundreds or even thousands of animals were killed, and nobody knows that. Nobody knew that at that time, because we didn't have data that the species are in the buildings. So another problem was lack of knowledge, lack of interest, and lack of capacities. And this problem is still in the place, unfortunately. And very important, public was absolutely not interested. When we started discussion about this topic, these problems, that everybody was saying, oh, come on, buildings are for people, not for birds. Let's go out, let's go to the nature, let's go to protected sites and do the conservation work there, not in the cities. Cities are not for species, not for birds, not for bats. So absolutely no interest of public. To give you an overview of what I'm talking about when I'm saying thermal insulation and reconstruction of buildings, these are the types of buildings that most of Slovaks lives in. It's very nice, as you can see. Just as an icebreaker, is there anybody who has been to Slovakia? I know at least 2 people, because they attended our conference in 2013. So as you can see, it's not the same as I see, for instance, in this city. And I explain why. Because we have species using... Pointer. Yes, pointer. Here. We have species using these particular spaces in the buildings. These are crevices between panels. Usually they should be filled in with a special material, but since these buildings are 40 and even more years old, this material is already out very often. So there are huge spaces, and bats love them. Absolutely. These are ventilation shafts you were talking about yesterday as well. You can find really small spaces here in this window parts. And these are the most common places for swift and bats. And then we have these parts where usually you can find a lot of nests of house martin, Delichon urbica, here, yeah, in the corners of the windows. And this is what's happening. Thermal insulation, scaffolding, especially during the breeding season, of course, because it's summer, it's nice weather, so it's really nice to work outside, also for the construction companies. And that's what we are dealing with, actually. So to prevent the killing of the animals, the massive killing of the animals, we succeeded to get funds from the European Commission and from the Ministry of Environment for this project. It was a 4 years project. And we were lucky because we were able to work full-time just on these issues for 4 years at the country level, which was absolutely amazing. We had a team of 20 full-time paid people, experts, and other external experts, and plenty of volunteers working with us. Without them, it would not be possible to achieve what I will present later on. So the first thing that was needed to be done was to collect data, because when we started approaching authorities, asking them to do something about this, then the first question was, okay, how many bats and birds are killed, where they are live, how many of them are, for instance, in Bratislava. And the answer was, oh, we don't know, we don't have the data. Okay, guys, collect the data and then come to us and we can talk. So we started collecting the data. As you can see, we managed to check quite a number of buildings in not only the big cities in Slovakia, but also in the small ones. Especially we focus on the big cities at the first place, and then the other urban areas where we had volunteers or experts helping us to do the monitoring. Then we analyzed the data. We created online database which is available for free. The data, you can download the data. But as we know that the people working at the decision makers and they don't have time to check online databases. So we created, we call it lists of priority sites. Based on the data, we selected sites that are really important for nesting of swifts and bats. And we created this list for all the cities we checked, and we sent this list to the relevant state authorities, which means construction officers, construction environmental offices, ministries, state nature conservation agency, and so on. Just to help them to have a list in front of them, and as soon as they are getting application, for instance, for construction permission, they can check whether the building that somebody is applying for is on the list or not. As soon as it is on the list, then they know that they have to start to think about biodiversity as well. And that was very helpful. Later on, at a later stage, especially in 2014 and 15, we also started monitoring of occupancy of the installed boxes. I have to say, it takes time to birds and bats to get used to these boxes. We were lucky to have like 30 or 40% effectiveness, which means that not even half of the installed boxes was occupied by the end of the project, but it's absolutely fine. Because it was only 2 years after the installation of the boxes. And as we know from the previous experiences from our colleagues, for instance, from the Czech Republic or Germany, it takes 5, even more than 5 years for species to get used to it and to occupy it. And if there are any other old buildings around the one they used to live in, they would prefer the buildings, not the boxes. But the boxes are absolutely perfect solution for the future, because you are creating something for the future when all the buildings are reconstructed. So this is some pictures from the collection of data. It was very useful to use these micro cameras here, because we were checking the ventilation holes and crevices. You cannot see, you cannot use just visual monitoring. You have to take a look inside. So this was very useful, and as you can see, we found something in there living. So as I mentioned before, these are the most preferable places, ventilation shafts, because they are deep and they are big. The spaces, they can host 10, even more than 10 pairs of swifts in a small space. It's a lot of space in there, in the roof. And of course, monitoring of droppings, because that's really good indication that the species are there, although you cannot see them always, because they are hidden in the building. So this is absolutely perfect indication that there is a colony of bats. And what I didn't mention at the beginning, I am talking especially about common noctul, Nyctalus noctula, because that's the main bat species living in buildings in Slovakia. We have small pipistrels as well, but this is This is the common noctule. This is the main species that we can find in our buildings. It's a little bit bigger one than the pipistrelle, so also the droppings are quite visible. And we created maps as well of distribution. This is kind of indication of the distribution. As you can see, the main nesting sites are in the big city. This is Bratislava, this is the eastern part. This is an exception. It's a really small city, but there are buildings with hundreds of pairs of swifts. It's absolutely amazing, and it's exception. It's the unique place in Slovakia. So this is my hometown, so it's also full of swifts, which I'm happy about. And we did the same for bats, for the noctula bat. So like, as you can see, the distribution is more or less the same. It's because they use the same spaces in the buildings. It's very often that in summer you found their swifts nesting in a ventilation hall, and when they leave in August, then in September you find their noctula bats in the same space. So they are sharing their flats, apartments, so it's really nice. Sometimes they have intruders like sparrows. We went further and we created very detailed maps for cities, for big cities. These are city parts of Bratislava. This is Petržalka. It's like a small city in a big city, but it's full of block of flats, these prefabricated houses. And this is another part of Bratislava. As you can see, we used these different colors to specify buildings that are occupied or suitable for nesting. Buildings that are absolutely not suitable. They have no crevices, no ventilations, nothing. And buildings that have been reconstructed or insulated, and the nesting and roosting sites were lost. So we did this for 6 big cities in Slovakia, and including lists of priority localities within this part. So again, the decision makers have this as a document to help them to see where they should take care of the biodiversity when it comes to making decisions regarding reconstruction and thermal insulation of buildings. Oops, sorry. As I mentioned, one of the main problems was that lack of information, lack of knowledge. And I am talking not only about the state authorities, but I'm talking about nature conservationists, professional nature conservationists as well. So we started organizing workshops and trainings for these people with not big success, I have to say, because they were very busy and it was absolutely out of them thinking to go for such a training. Yeah? And we managed to organize 15 of them, but we decided it's a waste of time because we had like 10 participants per training, and sometimes there was even more organizers than participants. So what we decided to meet all these people on the spot. When I am saying on the spot, I mean that you have a building that is being reconstructed, then you have construction workers, representatives of construction companies coming to the spot, checking whether everything goes well. Also state authorities coming to check whether all the requirements are met. And we organize meeting with these people exactly on the spot in the buildings, and we talk about the concrete buildings, concrete issues. And it was absolutely perfect for them because we spoke about specific compensation measures that were supposed to be implemented on the concrete building. So it was absolutely no general talk. It was to the point discussion. And we managed to organize quite a lot of such meetings with a big success, I have to say. We used this opportunity also to show them how to implement the compensation measures, because as somebody mentioned yesterday, we had also cases that, for instance, boxes for bats were installed upside down, also for birds, and for them it was absolutely, they could not understand why it's a problem if a bed box is installed upside down. So it was very useful to show them on the spot how to do it. We use very often a special compensation measure to evacuate the building to dislodged beds and to prevent them to go back. I will talk about it later, but this was something that took some time to construction companies, representatives and workers to understand, but I am happy to say that recently when I'm going outside and checking the buildings, then I am so happy that because they do it absolutely perfectly. So they learn how to do it over the last 5 years, and now we have one problem less. It was also interesting to check what our colleagues in the neighboring countries are doing, especially our friends in the Czech Republic, because they are even farther than we are. They started these activities back in 2006 or 2005, so they have plenty of experiences, and there is no language barrier, first of all. And secondly, since we have a common past as a former Czechoslovakia, the legislation and the architecture, everything is so similar, almost the same. So it was for us absolutely perfect to learn and to get know-how from the Czech Republic and implement it in Slovakia without any changes, any problems, because it was almost the same. And we also organized international conferences. As I mentioned, the first one was in 2013, and I am happy that there are at least 2 people that attended the conference. And the second one was in 2015, organized as the final conference of the project. And we applied the same approach as is applied here. We invited architects, urban planners, decision makers, professional conservationists, NGOs, everybody who has at least a little bit of interest in this topic. So these are some pictures from the events. This is the on-the-spot meeting. This just a few people, but very important people, because these are the ones that they will carry on the compensation measures in the future. They are representatives of the construction companies. It was mentioned also yesterday that public plays a crucial role in this topic. At the beginning, as I mentioned, we didn't have public support, and it was very often when we approach owners of or managers of the buildings and owners of the flats that were supposed to pay for the reconstruction. We approached them telling them that, look guys, you have these species here in the buildings. Be so kind and put at least 2 boxes on the building. So the first reaction was a huge complaint that, oh, why should we do that? It's not our job, you are the conservationist, so you do it. And yeah, so I should mention that when I will be talking about the financial issues, the boxes we are using are polystyrene boxes mostly. The cost of 1 box with 3 nesting holes for swifts, it's 30 euros. It's almost nothing comparing to the cost for reconstruction, which is around 200,000 euros. So that was complaint. Also regarding financial issues, why they should pay for it, yeah? Because cities, as I mentioned, cities are not for species, they are for people, and especially buildings. They were built for people, not for species. But anyway, we did it other way around. So first we approached media, explaining them what we want to do, what's happening. And at the beginning, media were not interested very much. But then when we provided them with alarming data of how many animals have been killed and with pictures of dead animals, that was the trigger. As everybody knows, when you put in the news something that there is a car accident, that, okay, but if you say there is a car accident with 10 dead people, then it's something, yeah? Then you started to be interested in this. So we provided figures, numbers. And we succeeded to get media on our side, and as you can see, we managed to get really good cover with this topic in media. And I remember a very funny situation when we organized the final conference. The manager of the conference room, we were like all TV, including the private ones and state ones, coming for an interview with us about this topic. And the manager of the building approached me asking, come on guys, how did you manage to get this media coming for such a, I don't know, such a strange topic? We are organizing startup conferences and so on, and we didn't get media here. So as you can see, this is also very important to find something that attracts public and media, something special, something maybe alarming at the beginning, and later on you can publish positive results of your work, as we did, of course. And project website was also available for all those interested to download the materials we produced. And leaflets. Unfortunately, I didn't have any with me here because they were all produced in Slovak language only. The reason was that it was a national project, not an international one, so we didn't manage to translate it in English. But there are some information in English about the project and its results, including the reports, so you can download it from the website. The link is on the screen. And what was very important also to inform young generation about these issues. We had a lot of lectures and presentations at schools. We installed a lot of boxes on schools just to allow kids to watch birds flying and nesting. And in some cases, they also managed to see bats, because sometimes they are flying in the daylight. And we used also official events like European Bat Night, because Slovakia is a member of Eurobats agreement. It's an agreement on protection of bats. And we used this opportunity to give presentations to a wide public. And this was absolutely icebreaker because everybody is scared about bats, and if they, as soon as they could take a close look or even touch them, it was, this lady was absolutely afraid. But after 5 minutes, she said that she wanted to have a bat at home. So this is really an icebreaker, and kids. It's absolutely easy to work with kids. Yeah? They want to touch everything, so they are not afraid at all. And we prepared also this exhibition, traditional panels with information, but we created this model of a building. One side is like before reconstruction with all the crevices, all the holes, all the places for birds, and the other side of the building is how it looks like after reconstruction. So just to give give them opportunity to see what can happen by reconstruction. And what was even more useful, we call it nesting wall. It's this one particularly, it's not just for swifts. These are boxes for swifts, and here you can see small holes. Yeah. So these are entrances to boxes for bats. Boxes for bats are absolutely invisible. That's very important. I will talk about it later when we approach architects and urban planners. That was the main complaint, that how the building will look like when you put boxes. It looks like this. It's not that bad, isn't it? Not all buildings have such paintings. This is this is an example, and this is another example. These are several nesting places for swifts in a box with this shape. So there are like 3 of them here. These are just silhouettes, painted silhouettes, but these are with nesting places for swifts. And this is so attractive for public that everybody was asking, oh, what's that? It looks like, it looks nice. Why is that? Is there something? Yes, it's a nesting place for birds, and so. And of course, we did the practical conservation measures. These are just the numbers that we achieved during the project and even after, because the activities are still ongoing, although the project ended in 2015. As I will talk about it later, installation of boxes and in general implementation of compensation measures has become a mandatory issue according to the legislation, which was a really huge success. And I will come to it later. So you can see the numbers. I think they are just excellent numbers that we achieved, and it's becoming even more and more boxes and nesting sites preserved. And here are examples. As I mentioned, these are the favorite places for swifts, and when they do the thermal insulation, putting polystyrene on the walls, they used to cover it with these plastic grids. So the very simple solution, just to get rid of it, these rips, and species can enter it still. So it's like preserved, original nesting site is still preserved even after the reconstruction. Here are examples of boxes. So as I mentioned, we are using these polystyrene boxes mostly. They are installed directly into the insulation. Yesterday there was a very interesting discussion about certification of boxes. These boxes are not certified, but instead of certification we get from the Czech colleagues, we get officially approved analysis of thermal flow or heat flow, I'm not sure if I'm saying it correctly, comparing walls without boxes and walls with boxes, and there was almost no difference. So it's kind of not jeopardizing the effect of the thermal insulation because it's the same material. And as you can see, these are the results. Yeah, the boxes are barely visible here. It depends on how thick is the polystyrene they are putting on the wall, but usually bed boxes are not visible, just the entrances, and boxes for swifts are barely visible. Just you see, these are swift boxes here, and these are bed boxes here. So from I can ask architecture, what do you think about it? how it looks like, but I think it's not that bad.
It's great. It was a bit what I was talking.
Microphone. Or, yeah, by the way, you can ask me wherever you want.
Decía, aunque lo estaba diciendo en inglés, pero es igual, por si acaso, que me... Okay, I was telling that...
Oh, sorry.
I was telling that I think this is great because this is the case I was talking yesterday about the building of the 70s, you know, that were these kind of buildings that need a new isolation, okay? So this is a very good example for everywhere in Europe because we're gonna find this everywhere.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna ask you for your business card later.
Of course.
to get some pictures of this, to show them here in Spain. Okay.
Yeah, actually we are lucky that one of our experts working on the project is also producing these boxes. So he's an e-shop, internet e-shop, so...
¿Le puedes dejar los cards?
Yes, I will take.
A mí también me parece un gran ejemplo de integración de nidos en edificio. Perdona. ¿Sí? Decía que me parece un gran ejemplo de integración de nidos en edificios y claro, aquí el problema sería que para aplicarlo en España imagino que sería más complejo porque el espesor de la capa de aislamiento que se coloca aquí en España supongo que no tiene nada que ver con los espesores que se colocan en países de Centro Europa. ¿Nos podrías indicar qué espesores se colocan de aislamiento?
Yes. It differs. It can be 10 centimeters, 8. In the south, it's usually 8 or 10 centimeters. In the north, it can be 12 or even 15. But I think the maximum is around 15, 16 centimeters. But yeah, absolutely agree with you. It's also why some of the Swift boxes are more out and the other are a little bit in. But with bed boxes, it's absolutely no problem because bed boxes are thin in general, so they fit into 8 or 10 up without any problems. Yeah. And here we are, yeah. So this is the topic actually what Jordi was asking me to present from the very beginning. So, how to start? This is not an easy topic to discuss about. I will start with explaining how the process is in Slovakia. So when you want to carry out reconstruction or thermal insulation of buildings, you have to apply for construction permission at the state authority. But when you putting together all the necessary documents, one of the documents you need, it is also so-called ecological assessment or statement from the environmental authority, state authority. So you go to the environmental office asking for this statement, but since they don't have time, they don't have capacities, and they don't have knowledge how to do it, they tell you, okay, but bring us ecological assessment from expert. And I believe that it was discussed also yesterday. So we have a list of experts we created during the project. that it's not officially approved by the ministry, but it's approved by the State Nature Conservation Agency, which is kind of a professional agency in charge of nature conservation in Slovakia. This list of experts was distributed to all the authorities, and they are providing them to the applicants. So, for instance, if there is somebody from my hometown applying for the construction permission, they will give him my contacts. He will approach me and he will ask me to write ecological assessment, as Joe told me it should be ecological assessment. So then I go, I check the building, and I write down the assessment, but there are two cases. Either they ask me to do it in winter, which is absolutely impossible to check whether there are some birds nesting or so on, or bats roosting, or they ask me to do it during the breeding season. The second case is much easier for me because I go there, I check whether there is something, and I write it down. In winter, I use the data from the monitoring we did in the previous years, and I write down an indication that this building might be occupied during the breeding season by birds and bats. And in this case, they are obliged, or one of the conditions I am putting in this ecological assessment, the first one is that as soon as they are starting the construction works, the scaffolding is there, they have to call me or other expert, and we will do detailed checking of the building with inspection camera and bed detector and everything from the scaffolding, because the scaffolding allows me to check all the crevices on the building. So this is very important. This is mandatory. I put it as the first condition they have to follow. So this is the way how we deal with the problem that if somebody is asking us to check the building in winter. Yeah, it's very difficult. And also during the breeding season, we can check the actual nesting, because sometimes they are starting construction works in June, July, where the breeding is already ongoing. So there might be some nests of Delicho nurbica, house martin, or other species. And there might be bats dwelling in the building during the summer as well. So this is very important that we have this obligatory, mandatory step, this checking just before the construction work starts. And if we find something, then we have several options, either to delay, to postpone the construction work if it's really necessary, but this is the last option we apply. We prefer more friendly options like construction works can be carried on even during the breeding season. You just have to put the nests that are protecting scaffolding, the upper part of the nest, you have to put it down to allow swifts enter ventilation holes, for instance. That's a very easy solution. They can continue construction works and the birds can continue breeding. And we have very positive experience with this. We had even falcons nesting in the building during the construction works without any problems hatching chicks. But of course, in these cases, we are checking the buildings quite regularly during the construction works. So, yeah, so that's the statement. So as soon as I write this ecological assessment, they have to pay for it, because I'm a freelancer, I have to eat as well. So they have to pay for it. They will take it to the environmental authority. The environmental authority will write official statement based on the ecological assessment and will include all the preconditions or requirements I include in the assessment. And then the applicant goes with all these papers to authority that is issuing construction permissions. And in the past, there was a problem. because the environmental construction offices or authorities, it was not mandatory for them to ask environmental authorities to provide their statements. So it was very often happening that basically the construction permission was issued without any environmental statement, anything like that. Later on, they had to ask environmental authorities, but the requirements included in the environmental assessment were not mandatory to be included in the final construction permission. So basically it was waste of time, waste of energy, because the requirements were not transferred to the main document. And another problem was that even though these requirements were included and potentially implemented, there was nobody who was checking the implementation, whether it was at all implemented, how it was implemented correctly or not correctly. So these were the main problems we were dealing with at the beginning. And yeah, how to deal with it? To change legislation is not an easy task. So, and to convince authorities that the legislation needs to be opened and such issues included. So what we did, it was an excellent idea of one of my colleagues. We approached representatives of the Ministry of Environment and Ministry of Construction and Transport and so on, that is in charge of construction and reconstruction of buildings and so on. We approached them with a document, we call it like a guideline on protection of swifts and bats. And these representatives, after several discussions and meetings, signed this document, and this document was giving, it was kind of a guideline for officers in construction offices and environmental offices, how to proceed when there is application for construction permission of a building. And all these issues I mentioned before, like ecological assessments, requirements, all of this was included in this officially signed document. It was not a policy document, but it has its power because it was signed by high-level representatives of the ministries, not the ministers themselves, but high-level representatives. And it was the first step we did. And later on, we were lucky because in 2012 or 13, I'm not sure, the law on nature protection was opened for modification and commenting for public and experts. And we took this opportunity and we started to comment on these issues. And as I mentioned a few years before we started this, we didn't have data, so nobody wanted to talk to us about this. But in 2012 and 2013, we already had the data we needed. So we came back to them, we provided them with these alarming numbers, figures, and we succeeded. And all these issues were included in the legislation. And what I explained in this ecological assessment, everything, it became mandatory. And that's absolutely necessary if you want to secure that all these things are taken care of in the future. Otherwise, it depends on people, and people at state authorities, decision makers, they are changing every year almost, or every 4 years after elections. So this was absolutely necessary and a huge success we achieved. And now, as it's described there, the construction office has to ask the environmental authority for the statement and has to transfer all the requirements in the final document. So all the requirements are now mandatory for the applicant, for the investor of the construction works. It looks easy, but it took like 4 or 5 years of discussion to achieve this. So we started even before the project started in 2010. We didn't succeed to include these issues in the policy documents back in 2008. It was rejected. We were told that basically we have the same as was explained here. According to the law, nature conservation in Slovakia, destruction of nest sites, manipulation of protected species, killing them and all these things, it's prohibited and you need a permission for that. But it was not enough, of course, because when you are putting polystyrene on the wall of the building, you are not touching the animals, you are not manipulating with them, and more or less, you are not directly destroying their nesting and roosting sites. You are just covering the entrances, yeah, and killing, not letting the animals to get out. But you are not killing them directly. So this was absolutely useless for this purpose. So now it's much stronger, the policy. And as I mentioned, it took some time, but you are on the right way, because as I mentioned, you are dealing with the same problems we dealt with several years ago. And what was also very helpful and important, one of my colleagues is also representative of Slovakia in the advisory committee of Eurobats. And he presented the project and its results at the advisory committee meeting. And he managed to convince representatives of other countries to develop and sign a specific resolution on bats in buildings, which is the first one of its kind. And all the signatory countries, which, as I learned yesterday, Spain is not a signatory country of Eurobats, unfortunately, are obliged to follow the requirements, the regulation. So this was also very important to back up our efforts to improve national policy, because we were referring, of course, to the European legislation, but this is something so specific that when we presented this at the Ministry of Environment and Ministry of Transport, it was even stronger argument than arguing with Natura 2000 regulations, for instance. Oh, well, I'm very proud of my team and my colleagues I worked with, and our effort was recognized at the international level, and this year we received this award, Best of the Best Life Nature Projects. So, yeah, I'm very proud of the team, and that's a reason why we should probably develop the follow-up project, maybe international one with you, who knows, to share knowledge. There are some pictures, just examples of where the species are hiding in buildings. These are pictures taken by micro cameras. As I mentioned, it was absolutely a must to have the micro cameras, otherwise we didn't have this proof. Because when we were approaching construction companies, okay guys, you have birds in that hall. Really? I don't believe you. Yeah, take a look. And here it is. Because droppings, it was nothing for them. Okay, it was here, but it's not here now. No, but it's hidden. So as you can see, there's ventilation holes in attics. As I mentioned, they are absolutely favorite places for nesting. It's also classic roof, as you have your houses, nests. The plastic grids we use, it looks like this at the end. It's very easy because there was a discussion that if they take off the grids here, then water will be entering when there is a rain, and it will cause damage. Absolutely simple solution. You just install these grids in this way, a little bit down, and the water is going out. as soon as it is in. So very easy, no-cost solution, because they are installing these grids anyway. So it just takes some time to remove the grids. And this is a very interesting example. There was a huge colony on it's a bridge overpass. It's in Malacky, and it was full of nests of swifts. And they reconstructed the bridge, and they had to remove the original cover the original crevices and spaces. And the construction company approached us, asking us for boxes. And okay, then we will give you like 5 or 10 boxes. No, we want 40 or 50. So this is like, sorry, oops. Where I am? Here. This is like, each pillar of the bridge is full of these boxes. These are Schwegler boxes. Very suitable here, not polystyrene ones. Quite expensive ones, as you know probably. But we have, I think, 40 or 50 of these boxes on the bridge. And what was even more interesting, that half of these boxes, or even more than half, was occupied after 1 year after the installation, because it was a huge colony, very much used to this place. So they almost immediately occupied the boxes. This was a very interesting example. It's another example of a historical building. It's a castle in Viglash, and it's private ownership, and the owner started reconstruction of the walls because they are falling apart. And of course the architects and cultural heritage officers were asking him to do something about it, so he did. And on top of it, he included these swift boxes in the walls. So they are hidden in there, so you can see here. It's almost not visible. And we have plenty of them here in the wall. It's more or less in the same place where the original nests in the wall were located. So again, it depends on people. It was the owner approaching us again, not the other way around, asking us whether he can do something about it, because he likes that it was full of swifts during the summer season. Visitors were looking at the birds as well, asking where they nest, so that has started his interest. This is another example of installation of boxes on this is a heating unit for a block of flats. And also the owner was very much willing to let us install these boxes here. Okay, yes, I will. I'm coming to the end, sorry. And this is another example. This is the first hotel for swifts in Bratislava. I believe there will be more. Again, the owner of the hotel approached us whether he can install swift boxes here. And he installed so many of them. I am not sure if it's a good approach, because there is maybe too many of them. But it's still, we present it as a good example. So maybe not all of them will be occupied at the end, but still, opportunity for future. Different types of boxes, different matrices, shapes of the entrances, size of entrances, just examples. And of course, this is an ice-breaking thing. It's a cute animal, isn't it? So, thank you very much.
Bueno, qué envidia, ¿verdad?